I want you to imagine a scenario with me today, and I really want you to put yourself directly into this environment.
Oh, I love these thought experiments.
Right. So it is a big day. You are walking your child into their very first day of kindergarten.
A highly emotional day for any parent, definitely.
Exactly. And you can probably picture it vividly in your head right now, the smell of fresh wax crayons, the tiny little coats hanging on those cubby hooks, maybe a brightly colored alphabet rug on the floor.
The standard comforting classroom setup.
Yeah, it is an environment that is engineered entirely for safety, comfort, and predictability. So you are feeling that familiar, I don't know, that heavy mix of pride and anxiety that every parent feels when they hand their kid over to the system for the very first time.
It's a huge milestone.
It really is. So you walk up to the classroom door, it swings open, and the teacher steps forward to greet you. But, and here's the twist, instead of the stereotypical, cardigan-wearing educator you might have conjured up in your head, this teacher has full-body tattoos.
Wow. Okay, that's a sharp pivot.
Right. We are talking thick, dark ink that creeps all the way up their neck, sprawling across their hands, and it's combined with multiple facial piercings that are just catching the fluorescent light of the hallway.
That is definitely not the standard predictive model for a kindergarten teacher.
Not at all. So my question for you, the listener, is this. What is your immediate visceral reaction in that first split second? I mean, before your logical brain kicks in, before your social conditioning takes over, what does your body actually do?
Well, if we are being completely honest with ourselves here, the physiological response in that visualization is nearly universal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your heart rate likely just spiked. Your breath might have caught in your throat for a fraction of a second. Your pupils probably dilated slightly to take in more information.
So it's a physical reaction before it's even a thought.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is a completely involuntary nervous system response. And what makes this such a phenomenal thought experiment is how rapidly that biological reaction is followed by a sociological one.
Oh, you mean the guilt?
Yes, the immense wave of guilt.
Yeah, because literally a millisecond after that spike of adrenaline, you feel ashamed. Because we have all been raised, completely saturated really, in the golden rule of modern social interaction, which is don't judge a book by its cover.
Right. It's drummed into us from childhood.
We are taught that evaluating someone based on their appearance is essentially a moral failure. So welcome to today's deep dive. I'm your host, and I'm sitting down with our resident psychology expert to explore exactly this tension. We are looking at the incredibly complex, sometimes really uncomfortable intersection of physical appearance, first impressions, and human personality.
It is a fascinating area of psychology, and I'm really excited to get into the source material we have today.
Same here. We are basically going to test the structural integrity of that old adage. The mission for you today, listening to this deep dive, is to figure out when you should absolutely trust your eyes, when you need to rely entirely on your gut instinct, and how to safely navigate a world where a person's wardrobe is a complex and sometimes deeply distorted mirror of their mind.
It's a vital skill set for everyday survival, really.
It is. Okay, let's unpack this. Why do we even judge appearances in the first place, especially when we spend so much cultural energy trying to train ourselves out of it?
Well, to really understand the mechanism behind that, we have to revisit that tattooed kindergarten teacher scenario and completely strip away the concept of shame from your reaction.
Okay, so take the guilt out of the equation entirely.
Exactly. When a parent feels a sudden hesitation or a certain inability to remain calm in that classroom doorway, it is rarely rooted in pure prejudice or malicious discrimination.
Interesting. So it's not just bigotry.
No, not usually. It is a primal, deeply ingrained, instinctive caution directed toward the unknown. Our brains are essentially, at their core, prediction machines.
Prediction machines. Okay, I like that.
Yeah, so you walk into a kindergarten classroom, and your brain immediately loads up a predictive model of what a teacher should look like, all based on cultural baselines and past experiences.
Right, the cardigan, the soft smile, the khakis.
Exactly. So when the reality sharply deviates from that baseline, the brain sounds an alarm.
So it's basically an anomaly detection system. It's not necessarily saying this person is evil. It's just saying, hey, this person does not match the expected pattern. Pay attention.
What's fascinating here is the evolutionary psychology underpinning all of this. I mean, human beings evolved over hundreds of thousands of years in environments where rapid danger assessment was literally the sole difference between surviving to pass on your genes and being eaten by a predator.
Wow, yeah. The stakes were a bit higher than a parent-teacher conference.
Just a bit. We had to make incredibly complex threat calculations based purely on visual cues, and we had to do it in fractions of a second. Was that rustle in the tall grass a predatory cat or just the wind?
Or is the posture of that approaching stranger from another tribe aggressive, or are they welcoming?
Exactly. The first impressions we experience today, that sudden, inexplicable gut feeling when someone walks into a room, those are the modern remnants of that ancient survival mechanism. We're running Paleolithic software in a modern metropolitan hardware environment.
Okay, but wait. If we recognize that this is Paleolithic software, shouldn't we be overriding it? I mean, the phrase "don't judge by appearances" is kind of the foundation of a polite, tolerant society.
It is.
So if we just give in to those snap judgments, aren't we basically reverting to cavemen?
And that right there is the core conflict.
Yeah,
It sounds incredibly morally correct to say we should ignore appearances. It feels like the right thing to do.
right.
But in real, gritty daily life, completely discarding information gathered from visual cues can actually override our deeply ingrained survival instincts, and often to our own detriment.
Give me an example of how that plays out.
Well, let's look at the terrifying inverse of the tattooed teacher. Consider someone who looks exactly like that comforting, expected stereotype. Soft-spoken, gentle appearance, non-threatening posture, maybe wearing soft pastel colors.
Okay, the ultimate non-threat, because they match the predictive model of a nurturer.
Yes. But according to our source material, there are numerous documented cases of individuals who cultivate that exact gentle, disarming appearance, specifically because they harbor incredibly dangerous intentions.
Oh, that is chilling.
It is. There are predators who intentionally present as harmless because they view small children as targets, and they absolutely know, that a soft appearance disables the biological alarm systems of the parents and the
Are
community.
they hacking the system?
Precisely. If we blindly adhere to the rule that appearance means absolutely nothing, we render ourselves completely vulnerable to those who actively weaponize appearance.
Man, that makes my blood run cold. It's the wolf in sheep's clothing, literally weaponizing our sociological desire to be tolerant.
Yes, it is a devastatingly effective strategy.
But here is the friction for me. If we are supposed to be open-minded, how do we actually reconcile that with this biological alarm system? I mean, we are told to be tolerant, but our brain is screaming, pay attention to the facial tattoos. Or in the other case, our brain is being lulled to sleep by the pastel cardigan while danger is literally right in front of us. It just feels like an impossible contradiction.
I understand why it feels that way, but it only feels like a contradiction because we tend to view human interaction as a binary choice.
What do you mean by binary?
We think we either have to judge someone entirely and conclusively by their appearance right then and there, or we have to completely and utterly ignore their appearance. There's no middle ground in our minds.
Ah, okay, so it's all or nothing.
Right. But our sources point out a massive cognitive difference between discarding information and not being swayed by information.
Break that down for me. What does that actually look like in practice?
Sure. Discarding information means you see the tattoos, you feel the spike in your heart rate, and you force yourself to pretend you didn't see them. You actively suppress the data to be polite.
Which means ignoring the Paleolithic alarm.
Exactly. Now, not being swayed by the information means you register the tattoos, you acknowledge your biological alarm system, but you do not let that single data point dictate your final conclusion about the person's character without further evidence. You keep the mental file open.
Okay, I love that. I like to think of it as treating appearance like a weather forecast.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Yeah, think about it. If you wake up, check your phone, and see there is a 60% chance of severe thunderstorms, you do not lock yourself in the basement, board up the windows, and cancel your entire life just because it might storm. That would be a massive overreaction.
Right, you'd never leave the house.
Exactly. But you also don't walk out the door in a t-shirt and just ignore the forecast entirely.
Grab an umbrella.
You grab an umbrella, you use the visual data, the forecast, as an entry point, as a foundational piece of the puzzle, but not the final unchangeable verdict of how your day is actually going to go. You just hold the umbrella just in case.
That analogy captures the mechanics perfectly. Ignoring the forecast entirely leaves you soaked and vulnerable. Treating it as an absolute certainty makes you a paranoid prisoner.
Exactly.
The visual cues, the tattoos, the posture, the clothing, the pastel cardigan that is your forecast, you take it in, you prepare your internal defenses accordingly, but you remain actively open to the fact that the sky might stay sunny, or that the gentle-looking person might be a storm waiting to happen.
So if a gentle exterior can hide a dark, predatory motive, and a heavily tattooed exterior might just belong to an incredibly artistic, loving, and protective teacher, The logical next step for most people is that we shouldn't rely on looking at them at all.
Which leads us to the next big misconception.
Right, because we constantly hear this advice. Just sit down, have a conversation, and get to know them. Words will tell you who they are. But as we're learning today, the reality is that words can be just as deceptive as wardrobes, if not more so.
Oh, absolutely more so. Relying solely on the content of a conversation to evaluate character is a massive cognitive trap. In many ways, words are the easiest things in the world to manipulate.
Really? More than appearance?
Yes. Human speech is largely processed by our neocortex, which is the logical, conscious part of our brain. So when you are listening to someone speak, you are evaluating their syntax, their logic, and their narrative.
You're following the plot of what they're saying.
Exactly. But while you're doing that, you are actively missing the physiological truth of the interaction.
Let's talk about the people who are absolute masters of this. Scammers. Con artists.
Think about the architecture of a successful con artist. They do not succeed by looking sketchy or acting suspiciously in a dark alley.
No, they're usually wearing a nice suit and smiling.
Right. Their entire skill set relies on making absolutely fantastic first impressions. They are hypervigilant readers of social cues. They know exactly how to mimic trustworthy behavior, how to mirror your body language, and how to use pacing and tone to actively lower your psychological defenses.
So they know how to turn off your Paleolithic alarm.
Precisely. If you are only paying attention to the logical content of what they are saying, you're going to fall for it. Because every single word they are saying is perfectly mathematically calibrated to make you trust them.
They are essentially hacking your neocortex. They feed your logical brain a story that makes perfect sense, so your logical brain tells your alarm system to just shut down and relax.
That is exactly what happens.
But there's another type of conversational deception we need to talk about based on our source text, and this one happens to regular people every single day.
Yes, the everyday encounters.
Right. It's not a scammer trying to drain your bank account. It's a person whose speech is perfectly logical. They aren't contradicting themselves. They are making complete sense on paper. They are polite. And yet, conversing with them completely and utterly drains your energy.
Exhaustion is real.
You walk away feeling inexplicably exhausted. Here's where it gets really interesting. We are talking about energy vampires, right? But what is actually happening mechanically in the brain there?
It is a profound physiological response. The logical consistency of someone's words can actually act as a smokescreen for their actual emotional state or intentions. When someone's words are perfectly arranged but you still feel exhausted, uneasy, or drained, it means your subconscious is picking up on a massive discrepancy.
It is the most bizarre feeling. I mean, you walk away from a chat at a local coffee shop and think, okay, they were perfectly nice. They didn't say a single offensive word, but I feel like I just ran a marathon and I need a 3-hour nap right now.
We've all been there.
I always picture this like a smartphone. Your brain is the phone, and the conversation you are having is the app open on the screen.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
The app looks totally normal. The graphics are fine. You're tapping the buttons. It is functioning perfectly. But in the background, without you seeing it, there is this massive, heavy, malicious process running that is just rapidly draining your battery and hoarding your RAM.
Yes.
You can't see the code, but you can feel the physical device getting hot in your hand, and you can watch the battery percentage dropping in real time.
That is a brilliant way to visualize it. That unseen background process is your subconscious mind working overtime. While your conscious brain is listening to the polite words, your amygdala and your subconscious processing centers are picking up on 1,000 different micro-expressions.
So they're seeing things the conscious brain misses.
Constantly. They are registering microscopic tonal shifts in the voice. They are noting the tension in the jaw, the rigid body language, the slight asymmetry in a smile that indicates it isn't genuine. Your brain is desperately trying to reconcile the polite words with the aggressive or toxic physical cues. And that massive computational effort is what causes the physical exhaustion. The cognitive load is immense.
So when you feel that exhaustion, it's not you just being weird or antisocial or introverted. It is an actual biological signal.
Exactly. The exhaustion is your biological alarm system bypassing the logical part of your brain. It is your body saying, look, I don't care how nice the words are, the math isn't adding up here.
The math isn't adding up. I love that.
And our sources stress that we must honor that discomfort. We have a terrible habit in modern society of gaslighting ourselves in these situations. We tell ourselves,
Yeah.
oh, I'm just being paranoid. They said all the right things. I should be nicer.
Right. We prioritize social politeness over our own biological intuition. We basically let our conscious brain bully our
We
subconscious.
do. And
Yeah.
we really have to stop.
hmm
Your intuition is processing somatic data, body data, millions of times faster than your conscious mind can articulate it into words.
So, if we cannot implicitly trust what people show us with their physical appearance, because a predator might wear a pastel cardigan,
Right.
and we cannot implicitly trust the words they tell us because con artists have mastered the script and energy vampires exhaust us, we are left in a very difficult position.
It does seem like a bind.
We have to look for the subconscious leaks.
Right.
We have to figure out what visual, psychological clues people are projecting into the world without even realizing they are doing it.
Which brings us to the things we choose to put on our bodies every single morning.
Hmm.
The psychology of fashion.
Yes, and I don't mean high fashion or runway trends here. I mean the mundane, daily choices of what fabric we drape over ourselves before we walk out the front door.
Because wardrobe is not just fabric. It is a deeply revealing psychological mirror. It is a broadcast of internal states, insecurities, and values.
Let's get into some specific examples from the text.
Let's look at a very specific one. The choice to frequently wear crop tops or heavily belly-bearing clothing. From a psychological standpoint, this specific fashion choice is often a physical manifestation of an internal thirst for love, attention, or validation.
Okay, I have to push back on that immediately.
I figured you might.
That feels like a massive generalization, right? I mean, what if it is just 95 degrees outside in the middle of July? Or what if a young person is just following a TikTok trend because they want to fit in with their peer group? How does the psychology separate a biological need for cooling down or simple trend following from a deep internal void of loneliness?
That is a crucial distinction, and the source material is careful about this. We are not talking about a teenager wearing a crop top to the beach once because it's hot.
Okay, good.
We are talking about a consistent baseline aesthetic choice across various environments. When someone consistently chooses clothing that exposes significant amounts of skin, particularly in environments where it might not be purely functional or weather appropriate, they are utilizing physical exposure as a subconscious strategy.
A strategy for what?
They are using their body to capture the gaze of others.
They are farming eyeballs.
In a sense, yes. When they secure the gaze of others, it triggers a very brief dopamine hit. It temporarily mimics the feeling of being seen, valued, and desired. It is an attempt to fill an internal void of loneliness from the outside in.
Okay, when you frame it as a repetitive behavioral baseline rather than a one-off outfit for a summer day, that makes a lot more sense. But what I found absolutely staggering about this concept in our reading is the comparison we can draw next.
The psychological twin.
Yes. If we take this person wearing the crop top, seeking attention at the club or walking down the street, and we look for their psychological twin, we find them in a totally unexpected place.
We find them in the library.
The library.
Yes. The psychological twin of the attention-seeking dresser is often the highly academically successful person who obsessively, relentlessly chases top grades and accolades.
The straight-A, perfectly polished, honor roll student, and the person in the crop top seeking attention at a party. If you put them side by side, society puts them in completely different sociological boxes. We judge one as frivolous and the other as highly virtuous.
We do, constantly.
But you are saying they are running on the exact same internal operating system.
They're running the exact same software, just executing different programs. Both behaviors bearing skin to secure the gaze of a room, or grinding out perfect test scores to secure the praise of a professor or parent, are fundamentally driven by the exact same thirst for love and validation.
That is wild to think about.
The internal desire to compensate for what is missing, that feeling of not being enough on one's own, it takes drastically different outward forms depending on the individual's environment, their natural skills, and their childhood conditioning.
Right, so whatever tool is closest to them, they used.
Exactly. One person learns that their physical allure is the most efficient lever to pull to get attention in their specific environment. The other person learns that intellectual achievement is their most efficient lever. One uses skin, the other uses a GPA, but the void they are desperately trying to fill is identical.
That completely flips how you look at a crowded room. You start to realize that two completely different behaviors on the outside. One person studying neurotically in the corner, another person dancing on a table, are being driven by the exact same engine on the inside.
It's a very unifying way to look at human behavior.
It really is. It makes you so much more empathetic. It forces you to stop judging the outward behavior and start recognizing the human vulnerability underneath it. But let's pivot here. What about the opposite end of the spectrum? What about people who aren't dressing to invite you in, but are dressing specifically to keep you out? People who dress to intimidate.
Let's examine the intimidating, heavily aggressive appearance. The heavy chains, the dark styling, the tough, almost militant exterior. The immediate assumption, driven by that biological alarm system we discussed earlier, is that this person is naturally aggressive, hostile, and dangerous.
Right. The Paleolithic software says run away.
Yes, but quite often, an individual cultivating this intensely intimidating appearance actually possesses a very gentle, highly sensitive nature.
So they wear a scary exterior because they are terrified on the inside.
Precisely. The intimidating look is an armor. It is a psychological fortress constructed of leather, chains, and aggressive posture. Because they are deeply sensitive, the fear of being emotionally or physically wounded is overwhelming for them.
So they beat everyone to the punch.
Yes, they preemptively construct a tough facade as a defense mechanism. The logic is simple. If I look terrifying, if I project an aura of violence and unpredictability, no one will dare get close enough to hurt me.
I used to think of this like a porcupine, puffing up their quills. But that doesn't really capture the scale of it. It's more like brutalist architecture.
Oh, I like that comparison.
You know those massive, imposing concrete government buildings from the 1970s?
The ones that look like bunkers.
Yes. They have tiny windows, incredibly thick walls, and they look unbelievably unwelcoming. They were designed that way to project unshakable strength and to discourage riots or attacks. But inside, it's just a bunch of regular people pushing paper around desks. The intimidating person is basically building a brutalist exterior to protect a very fragile interior.
That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
The exterior has nothing to do with the actual functions happening inside.
But this brings up a really dangerous practical situation for the listener. If someone's tough exterior is just armor protecting a sensitive soul, how do we know when it's safe to try and cross the moat and look underneath? Because let's be real, sometimes a scary-looking person isn't a misunderstood poet. Sometimes a scary-looking person is just a deeply dangerous, scary person.
And that is the profound danger of over-romanticizing this concept. You cannot walk through life assuming every aggressive-looking individual with a scowl is secretly a gentle giant waiting to be understood. That is a very quick way to get yourself seriously hurt.
So how do we balance that?
This is where we have to shift our perspective from viewing fashion solely as a disguise or a cry for help and start viewing it as a highly accurate blueprint. Because while clothing can certainly be a suit of armor, it is also a direct, unapologetic broadcast of exactly where a person places their values.
Okay, let's track the trends then. When does appearance actually equal personality? When is the broadcast literal?
Our source material outlines several clear, observable correlations where style choices directly reflect internal cognitive frameworks. Let's look at the deliberate rejection of standard presentation.
Like what?
People who wear an excessive amount of chaotic, flashy accessories, or those who severely sag their pants well below the waistline. These choices are deeply linked to a lack of internal calm or a fundamental rejection of discipline.
Let's pause on the sagging pants mechanism for a second. Why specifically that?
Well, think about what a belt and a fitted waistband represent physically. They are a restriction. They're a physical boundary that dictates how you can move. Sagging pants are the physical manifestation of rejecting that restriction.
Oh, okay.
Breaking fashion rules or adhering strictly to anti-establishment rebellious fashion trends often reflects a deeper internal distaste for societal rules at large. It is a physical manifestation of a psychological boundary being actively pushed. They are broadcasting. I do not conform to your structural expectations.
That makes total sense. It's a rebellion you literally wear.
What about highly sexualized clothing? We touched on it with the crop tops, but what if someone's entire aesthetic, day in and day out, is centered around overt sexuality? Like consistently wearing miniskirts in professional or casual settings where it just isn't the norm.
In this context, we have to view it through the lens of asset valuation. Everyone navigates the social hierarchy using what they perceive to be their strongest tools.
Their best assets, right? People who consistently choose highly sexualized clothing are signaling a very specific self-valuation. They are broadcasting that they view their sexual appeal as their primary weapon or their most valuable asset in navigating the world.
I can hear people getting defensive about that as they listen. Isn't that just a patriarchal judgment? Like, why is a miniskirt automatically seen as lacking intellect or professional skill?
It is vital to understand that this is not about an objective lack of intellect. The text is very clear on this. It is about the individual's internal hierarchy of tools. A person in a miniskirt might have a genius-level IQ.
They could be a brilliant scientist.
Exactly. But by consistently choosing to lead with extreme sexualization in environments where it isn't required, they are signaling that they believe their physical allure is the most efficient, effective way to gain leverage, open doors, or control interactions. They are playing what they perceive to be their strongest card. It is a strategic choice, whether conscious or subconscious.
They are leading with the asset they trust the most. That reframes it nicely. So what is the inverse of that?
Consider someone wearing a rectangular, rimless glasses, a crisp, well-fitted blazer, and a perfectly knotted tie.
The ultimate corporate uniform.
Yes, but let's break down the geometry and psychology of that outfit. Rectangular, rimless glasses feature sharp angles, minimal distraction, and strict geometric precision.
No frills.
Right. A tailored blazer and a tie physically restrict movement. They enforce a rigid posture. The tie literally points a straight line down the center of the body, creating perfect symmetry. This person usually possesses a deeply serious, highly orderly nature.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is not about judging these choices as inherently good or bad. A suit isn't morally superior to sagging pants.
That is the crucial takeaway. None of these styles carry inherent moral weight. They are simply a broadcast of the wearer's value system. An orderly outfit, built on symmetry and physical restriction, reveals a deep psychological desire to proceed with things properly, systematically, and predictably. They value order, control, and structure.
And on the flip side,
The person with the sagging pants values freedom from restriction, fluidity, and rebellion against structure.
understanding this value placement is basically the ultimate cheat code for you, the listener. It dictates how you should approach a person.
Absolutely.
Like, if you are going into a business meeting or negotiation with the rimless glasses and blazer guy, you better have your spreadsheets organized, your margins calculated, and your presentation perfectly linear.
Or they will dismiss you immediately.
Exactly. But if you are trying to sell a creative, out-of-the-box idea to the person with the rebellious, unrestricted style, you absolutely should not lead with rigid rules, corporate jargon, and rigid timelines. You will lose them instantly. Reading the wardrobe helps you gauge the psychological distance you should keep and the specific language you should speak to be heard.
It is a phenomenal tool for social navigation. You are reading the environment and calibrating your approach based on the physical data they are freely giving you.
And there's always but just when you think you have human beings completely figured out, just when you have everyone neatly categorized by their outfits into these perfect little psychological boxes, the blazer means organized, the heavy chains mean defensive, the crop top means validation seeking, the universe throws a massive wrench into the system.
The exception.
The glorious, confusing, paradigm-breaking exceptions. We have a very famous, real-world example of this in the text that completely shatters the neat little rules we just established.
Yes, the mixed martial artist, Conor McGregor.
McGregor is a fascinating psychological case study in wardrobe weaponization. By the logic of the rimless glasses and blazers we just discussed, McGregor should be a pillar of order. He famously wears incredibly sharp, bespoke, three-piece tailored suits. The fabrics are immaculate, the cuts are precise, the styling is pure, traditional corporate power.
Right. He looks like he should be running a Fortune 500 hedge fund or sitting quietly in a high-stakes board meeting.
Yet his behavior in those suits is wildly aggressive, deeply chaotic, and intentionally inflammatory. He acts like a warlord.
He does. He's often described in psychological analyses of sports entertainment as acting like a financial industry yakuza. He takes the ultimate symbol of corporate order and submission the suit, and he weaponizes it.
I mean, he literally wears a three-piece suit while throwing a metal dolly through the window of a bus to attack a rival. It is absolute cognitive whiplash.
Exactly. For McGregor, the suit does not represent a desire for calm order or systematic progression. It represents a desire for absolute dominance, extreme power, and an untouchable elite status.
He's taunting people with it.
He wears it to say, I am so wealthy and so violent that I can wear the uniform of the elite while behaving like a barbarian and you can't stop me. It is a completely different, highly aggressive value system wrapped in the exact same fabric that an accountant wears to signify obedience.
It's camouflage, but in reverse. He's hiding a predator inside a corporate uniform. But camouflage works the other way too, doesn't it? We talked earlier about flashy, highly sexualized, or outrageously loud clothing being a cry for attention or leading with your physical assets. But sometimes people dressed in the most outrageous look at me ways might actually be harboring severe, crippling social anxiety.
It seems entirely counterintuitive, doesn't it? Why would someone terrified of social interaction dress like a neon sign?
It makes no sense on the surface.
But it is a brilliant form of psychological camouflage. If my clothes are loud enough, if my outfit is outrageous enough, people will stare at the clothes, they will talk about the clothes, and maybe they won't notice how terrified I am to actually speak to them.
Oh, wow.
The clothing acts as a loud proxy. It does the talking, so the person's vulnerable interior doesn't have to.
They build a spectacle so you don't look at the person behind the curtain. That is incredibly sad, but so ingenious. And let's look at the opposite of the Conor McGregor example. You can have someone with a rough, deeply intimidating, Yakuza-like appearance, face tattoos, scarred knuckles, heavy boots, who actually holds a PhD in theoretical physics.
A brilliant, refined mind wrapped in an intensely rough exterior. Perhaps they grew up in a socioeconomic environment where that rough, intimidating exterior was absolutely necessary for physical survival on a daily basis.
They couldn't afford to look weak where they came from.
Exactly. But their intellectual curiosity drove them to the highest levels of academia. They did not abandon their roots. They carry both worlds with them simultaneously. The tattoos tell the story of where they survived, and the PhD tells the story of how their mind works.
And there are also cognitive differences that dictate behavior that you can't necessarily see on a t-shirt or a tattoo, right?
Yes, there's a massive difference between people who live purely in the present moment and people who constantly predict multiple future scenarios.
The chronic overthinkers versus the Zen masters.
Exactly. A person who is constantly calculating future scenarios, predicting what could go wrong, running risk assessments in their head, they often struggle immensely to enjoy the present moment. The cognitive load of living in the future is exhausting.
So how does that manifest physically?
Well, they might look perfectly relaxed on the outside. Maybe they were wearing casual, comfortable, unassuming clothes, but internally, their brain is running 100 crisis simulations. Meanwhile, someone who looks incredibly intense, maybe pacing or scowling, might just be deeply, peacefully focused on the exact physical moment they're existing in.
This raises an important question. If the mirror of fashion is sometimes a funhouse mirror, if it is sometimes totally distorted by massive exceptions like the suited brawler McGregor or the socially anxious exhibitionist or the PhD thug, how on earth do we use this system? Should we just throw the whole concept of reading appearances out the window?
Absolutely not. To throw the system out is to blind yourself. We must fundamentally shift how we define the data. We must treat visual data as a tendency, not an absolute law. We look for the trend, we acknowledge the high probability, but we do not bet our lives on it being a certainty.
It is a probability, not a promise.
Exactly. This requires a high degree of cognitive flexibility. Holding space for these extreme contradictions, the suited brawler, the PhD thug, the socially anxious, flashy dresser, is the only way to avoid the pitfalls of blind, rigid prejudice.
Because if you just rely on stereotypes, you'll be wrong half the time.
If you cannot hold two opposing ideas in your head at the same time without your brain short-circuiting, you will inevitably misjudge people. And when you misjudge people in a complex world, you will inevitably get hurt, either emotionally or physically.
So what does this all mean? Let's bring this all together for the listener. We started this deep dive talking about a tattooed kindergarten teacher and a biological Paleolithic alarm system. And we have wound our way through smooth-talking con artists, energy vampires, crop tops, tailored suits, brutalist psychological armor, and the chaotic dominance of Conor McGregor. What is the grand synthesis for the person listening to this right now?
The grand synthesis is that to navigate the world safely, effectively, and empathetically, you must embrace cognitive dissonance. You have to become comfortable with holding conflicting truths. You must use appearance as a vital biological entry point for information. It is your first line of defense, your first set of data points. You absolutely cannot ignore it, because ignoring it means purposefully turning off the survival instincts that kept your ancestors alive.
When you say cognitive dissonance, let's unpack what that actually feels like, because human nature hates cognitive dissonance. We desperately want people to fit into neat, stereotypical boxes. It takes actual mental calories to look at a gentle, soft-spoken person and tell yourself, they look safe, but I must remain cautious. It feels uncomfortable.
It feels uncomfortable because you are forcing your analytical brain to supervise your instinctive brain. You are holding the tension between reflex and response.
Reflex and response. I like that distinction.
A reflex is jumping out of your skin at a loud noise. A response is hearing the loud noise, turning to look, assessing the source, is it a gunshot or a dropped textbook,
Yeah.
and then deciding on a course of action. First impressions, the clothing, the tattoos, the posture, those should be treated as the noise that makes you turn and look.
It gets your attention.
Yes. It is not the final decision to run away or to embrace them. You must maintain the intellectual and emotional flexibility to accept that exceptions will always exist. You gather the visual data, you feel the gut instinct, and then you actively, patiently wait for the person's behavior over time to confirm or deny that initial hypothesis.
You cannot ignore the cover of the book. The cover is there for a reason. The publisher designed it to tell you something about the genre, the tone, and the content. If the book is covered in blood splatters and a knife, you shouldn't assume it's a romantic comedy.
Right, that would be foolish.
But you absolutely cannot assume you know every nuanced word, every plot twist, and the final ending on the pages inside just by looking at the jacket either. It is a balancing act. It requires immense patience, and it requires you to be fiercely comfortable with uncertainty. The visual data is just the knock on the door. It is not the deep conversation you're going to have in the living room.
That is the perfect way to encapsulate the physical world. But as we close this analysis, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final, perhaps unsettling concept to chew on.
Okay, let's hear it.
Everything we have discussed today, the biological alarms, the psychological armor, the broadcasting of values, is predicated on the physical world. We have spent this entire hour analyzing physical clothing, heavy chains, rimless glasses, tattoos, and the micro-expressions of a human face.
Because that's how we interact.
But our ancient hardware, that Paleolithic survival system, evolved over millennia specifically to read these physical biological cues. It knows how to read the tension in a jawline or the way fabric hangs on a shifting body. But we are rapidly accelerating away from purely physical interactions.
Oh, I see where you're going, the digital shift.
Yes. Think about how you navigate an increasingly digital world. If human survival instincts evolve to read physical cues, how will our primal danger alarms adapt in virtual spaces? In the metaverse, in expansive online communities, in virtual reality workspaces, a person's avatar, their digital wardrobe, their entirely manufactured appearance can be changed with a single click from a drop-down menu.
Wow, yeah, they can just equip a new personality.
They can put on the rimless glasses and blazer avatar in 1 second to project order and trustworthiness in a virtual meeting, and switch to the intimidating Yakuza avatar the next second in a different digital room.
It entirely detaches the appearance from the internal reality.
Completely. So are our ancient biological instincts equipped for a world where the cover of the book is entirely digital, perfectly curated, flawlessly rendered, and instantly mutable? Can a digital avatar ever trigger that same visceral, life-saving reaction we talked about at the very beginning? When you imagine walking your child into that physical kindergarten classroom and seeing a physical face covered in ink.
That is a terrifying thought, because without the physical micro-expressions, we are flying blind.
When the physical leaks of micro-expressions and body heat are removed, and we are left only with digital masks, how will you know who is the straight-A student and who is the predator in the pastel cardigan?
That is something you urgently need to think about the next time you log on, put on a headset, or trust a digital face. Keep reading the covers, but recognize that the very nature of the book is changing.